100% of women have abdominal separation by late stage pregnancy in their third trimester. Now, actually, all humans have a hole in their linea alba, which is what separates when we talk about abdominal separation, because that's where the umbilicus goes, right? 100% of humans have a gap there.
But the best way to figure out how your baby is doing is their heart rate. That pain, it changes the state of mind you're in. It is your wife who makes the decisions during childbirth. The Childbirth Attorney Podcast, hosted by Gina Mundy.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Childbirth Attorney Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Mundy, and today I have a very special guest, Tammy Potter. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gina. I'm really excited to be appearing on your podcast after having you on mine earlier in the year.
Oh, we had a great time. And I remember your podcast. I got up at 3 a.m. for it. Actually, no, we were on camera by 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So everybody knows, Tammy lives and is from Australia. But with that said, Tammy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell my audience all about yourself, how awesome you are, and how much you know about the pregnancy world.
Okay, so I don't know how awesome I am, but, very humble over here. I am a pregnancy and postnatal specialist. I've been coaching the pregnant population for over a decade now, probably getting closer to 15 years. And during that time, I think I've probably coached over 20,000 hours worth of women. Not all of them have been pregnant. Most have been in the pregnant or postnatal space, but certainly I've done, and that's probably on the conservative side, 20,000 hours of in-person coaching. I'm the host of the Pregnancy Process podcast and founder of the Pregnancy Process program, which takes women from the beginning of the first trimester all the way through to the end of the fourth trimester across 4 different pillars of health, being education, mindset, training, and nutrition. And that there also is the culmination of, I would easily say, over 10,000 hours of research and content creation. So yeah, being in the pregnant and postnatal space is something that I'm super passionate about. I've been doing it for a really long time, and it's probably my life's work. It's just helping women through that maternal metamorphosis.
Which is a huge metamorphosis. It's
Mm-hmm.
life-changing. Why did you get into this industry? What was that thing that kind of got you into this, what you're doing
When I
now?
became a strength coach, a lot of my friends at the time were having children, and I could really see the impact of that journey on them, not only mentally, but also physically. And then it was just one of those kind of virtuous cycles where the more that I learnt about it, the more passionate I became about it. And then the more women that I coached through this space, the more I understood their experience and how individual it was to each person. And the more that I coached women that had difficult pregnancies, that suffered from abdominal separation, pelvic floor dysfunction, not from anything I did, but, if they'd come to me postnatal and that had severe abdominal separation or pelvic floor dysfunction, the more that I realized how important this space was and at this time in a woman's life was, and how significant that journey can be in their health span and lifespan. So over the years, it really has become my life's work and probably my purpose to help women through this process and to make it as positive and empowering as it possibly can be.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. And I do want to talk today about the abdominal wall separation that women have, along
Mm-hmm.
with pelvic floor. Those two things with pregnancy are so, important. So, um, let's talk though first about fitness
Mm-hmm.
and pregnancy, which is what you're really good at,
Mm-hmm.
and what you know a lot. And like you said, experience working with pregnant women, I mean, that just gives you such a great knowledge base to have that one-on-one experience. I don't think that in my many years of doing this, I've actually met anybody who has as much, experience doing this and coaching and helping pregnant women like you. So thank you for
Mm.
coming on to, talk a little bit today about everything. But what I want to talk about is the research in working out when you're pregnant and the
Yes. So
changes.
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. This is all you. I am here also to learn because I do believe that, women that are, physically ready for labor, as everybody knows in this entire world, I'm a huge advocate of, a natural type labor, skip the drugs, skip the interventions. But part of that and part of what helps women get through the more natural process is being physically ready. So that's
Mhm.
why this episode is incredibly important to anybody who's expecting a baby. But anyway, well, and with that comes everything out there now. We have research, we have social media, we have the influencers. There's a lot to talk about. So let's start with the research, the change in the research.
I think it's a really interesting time to be in the fitness industry when it comes to training during pregnancy. And, as pregnant women and as also as coaches, so we can certainly talk about this from two separate standpoints. We can talk about it from being a pregnant woman and what the fitness, the changes in the research and what that means for you, but we can also talk about it from like a coaching perspective as well. But I think the overarching kind of theme here is about how the current research is changing the landscape of training during pregnancy. But I think most importantly, some of the things that we need to be really mindful of is the context in which this research is being done. Now,
Mm.
most of this research is being done on athletes or serious, what we call serious recreational athletes. Now, these women aren't under the same pressures as everyday, let's call them normal women, right? A lot of these women are outliers in that as an athlete, their job is their body. So their job is their body. They've got teams of people that look after every single aspect of their training, their recovery, their nutrition, and it's all encompassing, right? So nutrition and recovery is all part of your training. They also don't, and no shade to athletes, but their everyday stresses of going to work and dealing with work stress and that type of thing, and then training on top is slightly different to your everyday woman, in that, training is their actual job, right? So a lot of this research is being done on these women where exercise is extremely well tolerated. Now, there are some women that when they fall pregnant, they look at this. So now I'm gonna get sidetracked here, so I'll try and stay on point. So what I'm finding is happening in, I guess, the coaching space is the research is moving forwards quicker than the guidelines are changing. So we're now in this weird space where you've got some coaches that are kind of seeing this exciting new research coming through and they're pushing the boundaries on that. So all of a sudden, supine training is now being adopted where the guidelines still say, and of course this is looking at being changed, but it hasn't changed yet. So the guidelines are still saying that you can't train flat on your back after 20 weeks. But with this new research coming through that's saying it's well tolerated, some coaches are moving rapidly with that research and they're throwing that out the window. They're also looking at other types of exercise and being like, well, this person here can do it. All of my clients can do it. So they're really pushing forwards in one direction. And then you have another direction where people are still kind of like, I guess, treating women like they're too precious when they're pregnant. So the line has to be down the middle. And I think it needs to be, again, extremely individual and based on the person in front of you and what their what their experience is in terms of training, what their lifestyle is like, the other stresses that they have in their life. And that's where the individualization comes in. So it is a really interesting time in the fitness industry where it's almost like there's two different camps. But I think as women that are trying to decipher all of this information, because, pregnancy is hard enough as it is. There's so much change happening to a woman's body, the way that they train is changing, or the things that they can and can't do. They're not sure what's safe in the gym anymore. So it's really hard for these women to decipher the information and what's going to be appropriate for them. And then on top of that, you've got your social media influencers. And I've seen this a lot lately in that a lot of these social media influencers are falling pregnant, and their pregnancies are, I guess, experienced a lot more online. So women are going online, they're going on Instagram, they're going on TikTok, and they're seeing pregnant influencers who, again, training is their life. Their bodies are their tools, essentially. And a lot of them have very, very strong training backgrounds. So their pregnancies, again, are going to be falling in that serious recreational athlete, if not athlete section. So then you've got women looking at these influencers, athletes, and seeing how they're training during their pregnancies. And this is opening up a can of worms where they're comparing themselves to athletes, to influencers, without understanding that these people are outliers in their professions,
Mhm.
And I think a really, really good, I guess, story or like that I can share with you that really encapsulates this is a dietitian that I work with and have worked with really closely, personally and professionally over the years. She works at the Queensland Institute of Sport now. And just recently, she shared a post where one of her athletes was postnatal. She was very early in her postnatal days, like within 6 to 8 weeks postnatal, and she was back at training. So the post that the dietitian shared was actually of herself testing her athlete's urine. Right. So this is the lengths that athletes are being supported. They have teams of people testing their urine to make sure that their electrolytes are balanced to ensure that it doesn't impact their breastfeeding journey. Now, a normal person, there's no way that that's going to happen. So I think we really need to take into consideration the support that pregnant and postnatal athletes and influencers where their body is their job actually receive in comparison to what an everyday woman receives.
That is so true.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you then, if somebody's looking at this research, because, guidelines do change,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a situation where it's recommendations, usually they're kind of medically based. Those change all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, before they change, a lot of times that's when the buzz starts with the different kinds of research.
Mm-hmm.
So if a mom is out there and she wants to start, doing her research and whatnot on how to work out pregnant, at the gym, or what's appropriate, what's not. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what does she look for in terms of the different types of research?
I think it depends on what type of person you are. If you're a very much evidence-based person
Mhm.
and you're actually looking at scientific studies and that type of thing, or you're an everyday woman that's typing into Google, what can I can't I do in terms of training during pregnancy, the answers are going to be quite different. So I think overall, we also need to consider, and it's the same with me as a coach, I need to really consider, and this might be branching off into a different area, but as a coach, I have a responsibility to and a trust placed in me by the women that I work with to ensure their safety. And from my perspective, until the guidelines change, I'm legal, and this is going into your realm as well. But until the
Mhm.
guidelines change, I'm legally responsible to make sure that I'm following the guidelines as set by the medical, I guess, boards. You've got ACOG, you've got the Australian New Zealand Obstetrician Society. I think that's what it's called. A RANSCOG, that's what it's called. They have guidelines in terms of what exercise is well tolerated during pregnancy. And I think that goes back to where this research is coming from. The research is now changing these guidelines and pushing the boundaries of them. But until the guidelines change, that's really where women should be looking towards for the basic understanding of what they can and can't do. Now, then, of course, it's very nuanced underneath that, because the guidelines are quite broad in terms of, how many minutes of cardiovascular, strength training 2 to 3 times a week. Then the supine training comes up again. So, your guidelines, I think it's 200 to 300 minutes of cardiovascular training per week. Now, that can be broken up into different ways. So you can have, I think it's like up to 75 minutes. And I should know this off the top of my head, so I'm sorry that I'm being like a little bit vague here. But I'm pretty sure that it's up to 75 minutes of higher intensity exercise, or 150 to 200 minutes of like zone 2 type was cardiovascular training, strength training 2 to 3 times a week, and avoiding contact sports, as well as not training on your back. So those are kind of like your rough guidelines, and you can find them on ACOG websites. You can find them on the RANSCOG websites. So if you were searching for information around that, that's probably the first place that I would go. Now, in terms of finding people that you can trust to guide you through these things, again, like you mentioned, and as it's very difficult to say this without sounding egotistical. There are very few women out there, or very few coaches out there, that do have the experience that I have, hands-on experience coaching the pregnant and postnatal population. So, like I said, I've been coaching in person for probably close to 15 years now, and 13 of those have been working with the pregnant and postnatal population hands-on. I've done countless courses, and I've done an insane amount of study to develop the pregnancy process program. Um, so I think also, when you are looking for people to guide you through that, or influencers that you can get that information from, because, let's be real here, a lot of people are going to social media. You need to be really, I guess, careful and do some research on the person that you're getting this information from. It's very simple to just write pre and post specialist on your bio. It's another thing entirely to actually be one. And the reality is, not many people really truly embody a pregnancy and postnatal specialist. They might have done one course. That's fine. They're educated in that area. That's better than not having done it. Or they might have had a baby themselves. Now, that opens up a whole other can of worms, where their experience, especially if they're an influencer, and I'm not saying they're all like this, because there's certainly some incredible influencers that are very educated around this, and they've shared their pregnancy experience really authentically, and they've been really careful around that. But there are certainly other influencers that maybe haven't done the same. So I think you need to be really careful about researching who it is that you're actually getting this information from. So,
I have a
yes.
question. Now, if they're
Yeah.
actually looking for a coach, they're
Mhm.
listening to this episode, they're looking for a coach. What are some good questions that they should be asking? Or even if they, follow some influencers
Mhm.
on, Facebook or Instagram, I guess, whatever people follow, TikTok, wherever the influencers may be. Like, because that's a good point. I feel like these days, people can just write, I am this, and they just label themselves and they just go. But are they? I
Mm.
mean, how do
And
you decipher?
that's the unfortunate thing about the fitness industry is it's very unregulated. It's extremely
Yeah.
unregulated. So you can pretty much say that you're anything and and it be real in the world of social media. So I think again it comes back to asking the questions around, okay, so how many pregnant women have you coached in person? Because I really believe that this experience, the maternal metamorphosis, the more hands-on experience a coach can have, actually boots on the ground, on the tools, training pregnant women in person is actually really important. Like I think these days with the rise of the online coach, I think online coaching is very different to in-person, hands-on, in-person experience because the body does things that you maybe not be able to see online coaching, right? Where if you're actually hands-on touching their pregnant bump, you can feel how they're breathing, you can see how they're moving. It's very different. So I think actual hands-on coaching experience with pregnant women, that's a really important question for people to ask. What kind of qualifications have they done? I think again that's extremely important, like, because again there are people out there that are doing incredible things in the education space when it comes to pregnant and postnatal women. So I think the education that they've done, and have they got a proven track record of ongoing education around this, or have they done one course once to get qualified? And I think that's a really important distinction. It's the ongoing process of education and continuing education in this space, because it's very simple to have a baby, do one course once, and then become pregnancy and postnatal qualified. It's another thing entirely to actually live, eat, and breathe this area.
I'm looking, I'm reading something right now that we had talked about. It says that there's research showing that women can safely deadlift 70%, 76% of their,
1 RM.
yeah, what's 1 RM?
That's your 1 rep max. Now, I completely agree with this. And because the thing is that strength is relative, right? So what I can deadlift is going to be really different to the woman that's fallen pregnant and never picked up a weight before. Does that make sense? So this is again backing up what I'm talking about in terms of the research being done on athletes or serious recreational athletes. Now, the serious recreational athletes are people like, your CrossFitters that compete at like a state or a national level. You've got, unpaid athletes, basically. You've got your powerlifters, you've got your bodybuilders. These are people that, are very serious about their physique and their sport, that would know what their 1 RM is versus someone that, maybe just goes to the gym and does some classes or has never lifted a weight before falling pregnant, but know that they need to be strong. So your 76% of your 1 RM, that is actually in a very safe limit. And I mean, I train women, like one of the things that when I train pregnant population, especially in person, which I'm doing a little bit more of at the moment because I'm in the process of redeveloping my online program. So I'm just doing a lot more in-person coaching. But one of the things that is very important for a lot of women that might be coming to me that are early in their pregnancy and maybe they haven't trained for a little while, off the top of my head, I've got a client at the moment. She is on her second pregnancy, and she hasn't really done much in between. So she's fallen pregnant with her second child, and she hasn't really done any kind of structured exercise in between. But she knows that this pregnancy, she wants to have a better pregnancy than her first one, and she wants to exercise through it. Now, something that was really important for me to impart to her was that you can progress your training throughout your pregnancy. So if you're someone that's really well trained and you've fallen pregnant, that's probably not going to apply to you because you're going to have to back off, right? So if you're deadlifting 100 kilos, then 76 is a safe range for you because it's 76% of your 100 kilo 1RM, right? Or 76% of what you were doing before. Whereas for a person that I was trained, that I've just mentioned, who hasn't really been doing anything, deadlifting 76 kilos is actually very significant. Now, do I think I'll be able to get my client to deadlifting 76 kilos throughout her pregnancy? Probably not, but I'll certainly be moving her towards a conventional deadlift in a safe way. She might be able to deadlift 40 kilos. I'm not sure. We haven't got there yet, but we're getting there. We're slowly getting there. So I think just recently, using a different modality, she was deadlifting maybe 32 kilos, So when I finally get her onto a conventional deadlift, she probably will be deadlifting close to that. But it's all relative to what your strength is before. So I definitely think that 76% of their 1RM, for those that know what that is, 100%.
Is that in the guidelines? Or is that just from research?
In terms of specific guidelines, there is some factors around going to about 70% of what your previous was across the board. Now, that can be pushed out. And I know for me, on my clients that I know that are well trained, I can get them up to probably like 85% in some kind of like higher intensity cardiovascular work. They might be working up to 85% in terms of like, how hard are you working right now? They're probably like, an 8 out of 10. Fine. For an untrained individual, 85% is going to be different, right? So it's all relative. But yes, that would be probably around what the guidelines would say in terms of like going to about 70%.
Of what you were doing. Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Guidelines always seem to be more conservative when it comes to somebody who's carrying a baby.
And I think that that's for a reason, right? Like the guidelines are conservative because most women during pregnancy are carrying the most important thing in their entire life within them. And they want to be cared for, and they want to make sure what they're doing is safe for them and their baby. There are some women that have tried multiple attempts at IVF. They've had multiple miscarriages. Their journey to pregnancy, and I've certainly trained many women like this, their journey to pregnancy has been very difficult. And for women like that, they know that they need to move their body, but they also know how difficult the process has been for them. So they don't want to do anything that could potentially jeopardize them. And then I think that's also where the psychology of this comes in as well. And that what if? Because and again, that's where the guidelines come in too, and where following the guidelines as coaches is very important, because if in the awful event that something happens to your client, even if it's in the early stages, you want to be able, as a coach and as a human, to be able to like put your hand on your heart and say, nothing that I did could possibly have caused that. And you want your client to be in that same realm as well, where they look at what they were doing and they were like, nothing that I've done could have caused this. Because no matter how much we tell women that there's a genetic component, like there's a strong genetic component to pregnancy loss in early stages and then further on, women always will carry some kind of sense of like, oh, did I do that wrong? Could I have done that differently? So you also need to manage that psychology aspect of it as well, especially when you're training women in early stage pregnancy. And like I said, with women that have had difficult journeys to pregnancy.
So in pre-show, Tammy, we had talked about a study that I found very interesting, and that is where mom needs about 50,000 additional calories in her pregnancy.
Yeah.
That is that a lot or is that normal?
No, that's pretty normal. But when you think about how many days pregnancy actually is, just of an average, let's just do the calculation here. So if you've got, I know this calculation's not going to be 100% accurate, but let's say we've got a 40-week pregnancy, right? And you times that by 7 days equals 280, right? Now, if you divide 50,000 divide by 280, it's 178 calories a day.
Oh, that's it?
Right? Yeah, so it's not
Oh.
actually, it sounds like a lot, right? But when you break it down, it's actually not that much. And when you look at that, the first trimester, they say you don't really need to add any extra calories. The second trimester, you do, and it kind of gradually increases. And that's really dependent on your body weight when you first fell pregnant, and like whether you're overweight, underweight, all that type of thing. So your calorie increase during pregnancy is very individual. And obviously your healthcare provider will help work with you around that. But 178 calories is about right. That's a banana and maybe a couple of nuts, or I think a glass of milk actually covers that. But the whole thing that's talking about is energy expenditure and how much energy it actually takes to create a baby, and how much of that energy actually goes to the mum versus how much of it goes to the baby. So there's a lot of physiological processes that happen in the mum during pregnancy. You've got the changes in blood volume, you've got the changes in your basal metabolic rate, which is how many calories you consume at rest. And, by third trimester, that goes up by almost 30%, which is pretty incredible, really. So you've got like the building of an organ, you're creating a whole organ that then gets expelled in the placenta. So the mum is doing all of this incredible stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why I just am so obsessed with training during pregnancy and like postpartum. I think the transformation that women go through during this time, it physiologically is absolutely incredible. There's not a single part of their body that goes unchanged during pregnancy, from their brain to their hair to their nails to their skin to their physiology, their blood, everything, their internal organs. There's so much change that happens. So I'm sorry, you can see how I'm getting like super passionate. And then on top of it, they're actually building another human, right? Like when you think about that, when they give birth, like every single fingernail, every tooth, and when you think about it from like a more spiritual perspective, especially, as a mum of daughters, because I know you have a daughter. Yeah.
I do. Two daughters and my son.
So when you think about this, when you were creating your child, you were creating the eggs of your grandchildren. Isn't that incredible? I love that so much. Like, and there's like a lineage of that. So your daughter, when she's pregnant, she's creating the eggs of her grandchildren. So it's that incredible kind of like, it's like that mirror that you go and see in the fun house. That's just that repeating mirror. It's like that, right?
Going.
And it's very cool. I love that from like a spiritual perspective.
Wow.
So, your body is going through all of these incredible changes. Sorry, I know, look, I'm getting distracted here. But the amount of energy that the mum requires, yes, it's around 50,000 calories during the pregnancy, but 96% of that, I think they've had new research show that 96% of that actually goes to the mum rather than to the baby and making the baby. So energy expenditure during pregnancy, and this comes down to what happens when training during pregnancy as well. Energy expenditure is extremely important. So making sure that you're not over expending energy in your own training. So that's, I guess, that for people that are used to training a lot, that can be quite difficult, is understanding that their energy demands are now different. And, as humans, we all have a finite amount of energy each day. And like I said, pregnancy really increases the demands on those energy systems. So when it comes to training during pregnancy, you have to be quite careful that you're not dipping into those energy demands too much. And that's where your recovery and your nutrition comes in. So making sure that you're really staying hydrated when you're training. So when you are training, that you're staying hydrated, you're taking your hydrolytes or your hydromama or some kind of hydration supplement to help keep you hydrated. You're also making sure that on the days that you are training, that you're actually consuming extra calories. So not only on top of the extra calories that you're meant to help support the pregnancy, but some extra calories on top of that to make sure that you're kind of inputting the energy that you're outputting from the training. Because you have to remember, training during pregnancy, the goals change, right? So it's not aesthetic. It's not about controlling your body anymore. It's about healthfulness. It's about supporting your body in a way that it's about supporting your body to help counterbalance all the physical changes that are happening to it. And I think that's where also, like, this kind of opens another door in terms of like the psychology of training. So I can certainly go into that a little bit if you like, because I know that there's many women out there that struggle with letting go of certain aspects of their training during pregnancy, because there's certainly many women out there whose training style really, it's part of their identity and who they are, and there's a real struggle of letting go. So I've kind of meandered through those subjects. So if you'd like to, we can open that up, or we can talk more a little bit about the metabolic demands of pregnancy and being careful about energy balance and that type of thing.
Either way, that is so. I was a runner, but I would never run during pregnancy. So for me, that shift, it was my identity. So it was a difficult shift, and then as soon as I I was running again. But
Yeah,
I
and
know, so that's interesting to me. I mean, we can hit that. We can hit. I also have a bunch of other good stuff too that you had sent me that we can go over. But yeah, I
okay,
mean,
well
how does that
let's
work? How do
let's
women like
cover the
make that?
running. Let's cover the running during pregnancy. So you were a runner during your before pregnancy, and you still run. The
Right.
thing is, like, when it comes to running during pregnancy, I kind of sit in two different camps, right? So if someone comes to me and running is really, really important to their mental health, they are a runner, they're going to not feel themselves during pregnancy, and it's really important for them to continue running during pregnancy. As a strength coach, there's a few things that I could probably do. So firstly, we might look at, okay, what is the mental health impact of taking something so important away to this person? What's that going to do to their mental health? And then if that's going to have a very significant negative effect on them to not do that during their pregnancy, then it becomes like, okay, how are we going to be able to support this during pregnancy? Are we going to be able to utilize other modalities to get a similar response from the body, or is it really just about the running? And if it is just about the running, it's like, okay, so now we need to look at a team of people that can support this woman to run during pregnancy for as long as she possibly can. Now, that might be certainly making sure that she has clearance from her healthcare provider to continue running, and then B, sending her to the specialist women's health physio on a regular basis to make sure that we're monitoring her pelvic floor and making sure that that's staying strong throughout her pregnancy, and then incorporating
Mhm.
strength training to make sure that we're keeping her structurally strong and stable to continue doing that, right? And if one of those things is no longer supporting her, right? So if her pelvic floor is being impacted, then it needs to become another conversation. Okay, this is what's happening. We can see that your pelvic floor is being impacted by the running during pregnancy. You're structurally strong and you're physically able to do it. Is having issues with your pelvic floor or damage to your pelvic floor or this impacting your pelvic floor, is that enough for you to maybe reconsider, or you still want to go ahead, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So then it becomes a decision on them, and it's like, okay, well, would you consider maybe some alternate stimulus? And when I say stimulus, I mean like, let's try seeing if you can get on the bike and get the same response. Let's see if we can try getting you in the pool. Let's see if we can try getting you on the cross trainer, and actually, or doing some high intensity, low impact intervals, if you know what I mean. And let's see if that helps.
Right.
And then you can go from there. But in terms of the identity piece, and this is something that I certainly see a lot in gyms, is that the way a woman trains, especially for these serious recreational athletes and runners, right, it becomes part of their personality. It's part of who they are as a person. And they identify with themselves quite a lot via their training system, right? So you've got people being like, I'm a runner, I'm a power lifter, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm a bodybuilder. So part of people's identity is in how they train. And this is where I see things getting a little bit tricky for these women that are quite well trained and identify with these aspects of themselves, in that it's really hard for them to let go. It's really hard for them to let go of being a CrossFitter or power lifter throughout the duration of the pregnancy, and seeing this as a season where there needs to be a gentle kind of letting go of certain aspects of themselves for a season, to be able to make sure that they can come back stronger. And I see this a lot. And again, we can weave that back into the influence of social media and the influence of the research being done on athletes and serious recreational athletes that are telling these women, you can do this. It's okay to do this. This is what the research says, and this is what your idols are doing. This is what these athletes are doing. This is what these influencers are doing. So then these women are looking to these people, the athletes, and being like, well, I do CrossFit. She did it during pregnancy. Why can't I do this? If you know what I mean, without taking into
Yeah.
consideration that they have work stress that's different to these people. They have potentially other children. They've got relationship stress, financial stress. They don't have teams of people going to them. So it's so multifactorial. And this is what I mean. It's a really interesting time in the health and fitness industry when it comes to training during pregnancy. So I think when it comes to that kind of self-identification to training styles, there has to be an aspect of looking at training during pregnancy as a period of looking after your body to make sure it remains as structurally strong and stable as possible, trying to counterbalance the impact of pregnancy on your musculoskeletal system, and trying to, I guess, care for your pelvic floor and your abdominals in a way that makes returning to your chosen sport or way of training the smoothest possible path postnatally. Does that make sense? Because you can impact, and
Yeah.
it's interesting when you go onto any kind of social media post that it's divisive, right? And so training during pregnancy can be quite divisive. So you've got women that have suffered from serious pelvic floor trauma, abdominal separation, and they're the ones that were like, I think I did it that because I did X during my pregnancy. And so when you go to the comment section on a lot of these posts, you have women that say, listen, I did that during pregnancy and this is what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
yeah. So it's divisive, and yeah. I know.
I think ultimately too, a good guideline to follow, and maybe you talk to your clients about this is, and maybe you've even said it, this sounds like listening to your body is, huge because we are all individual. We're all
Mhm,
different. There are guidelines out there. But guidelines are very general and they
mhm,
apply to everybody when in reality, working out in pregnancy and what you can do versus somebody else is very individualized.
Mhm.
And there
Mhm.
is so many different factors. So yeah, it is important to, I think, just listen to your body and, do what you can do, but not push it. And then not push it because I'm just reading this. I love all the stuff you send me. Over exercising without adequate nutrition can temporarily divert resources and optimal fetal growth. So that was huge.
I
That
think that
was that part of
without the
the
adequate nutrition is very important in that piece. So we don't
yeah.
want, like, and that's what I came back to saying. And I don't mean to interrupt you there because
Mhm.
we don't want women to fear training during pregnancy, and it's very individual. We don't want them
Yeah.
not pushing themselves, but they have to make sure that they're eating adequately. You can't, and I think that's a very important piece there.
Well,
And it
right. I
can't
mean,
be
what
all
you're
the time either. You can't just be pushing yourself, pushing yourself, pushing yourself.
right. And that's part of the whole working out, during pregnancy. I get it. You have to have recovery and you have to have nutrition. And I like
Mhm.
what you said in the stuff you sent over. You said think of energy as a budget. You only have so much. You can't spend more than you have, especially always keeping in mind that, you're growing a little one in your belly.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, that stuff, such great stuff. Another thing that you sent me, I love, and this is
Yeah.
so true. The signs of energy imbalance, the signs that you're running low on energy. And you know what,
Mhm.
everybody? You can take this part with you wherever, because I'm reading these. I'm like, oh, uh, signs of lack of energy, excessive fatigue. Ah, I've had that today. Um, let's see, poor sleep.
Mhm.
Yep. Declining performance. Yeah, yeah. Mood changes. Yes, I get extremely irritable when I'm tired. But I think too, even just being aware of the signs of being, exhausted. And what if somebody is experiencing these signs of energy imbalance? What do you recommend?
Well,
Go
the
to
funny
bed?
thing is that those signs almost point to every single woman's pregnancy experience anyway. Like, you know, so, like, how
Me.
how do you how do you I think the thing is, how do you decipher between what is normal pregnancy fatigue, poor sleep, declining performance, and mood changes, and what actually really points to, a sign of energy imbalance in terms of, am I doing too much? And I think if you're doing all of the right things, right, you're ticking all of the boxes, you're being really considered with your nutrition, you're adding extra food on the days that you're training maybe, 3 strength training sessions and a couple of cardio sessions, but then, you're trying to tick all the right boxes, but then you're still feeling that even more fatigued and your sleep is really terrible. And you're really like more irritable than would possibly be usual for pregnancy. I would definitely start talking to my healthcare provider about that because they are also signs of mental health too, right? So, and I think or the development of mental health issues. And I think when you look at the amount of women, I think 1 in 5 women suffer from mental health like concerns during pregnancy and the postpartum period. I think too often women chalk up these signs and let's say it and let's just talk about this for a second. Some women could be over exercising because they're struggling mentally with all the changes that they're going
Mm-hmm.
through, right? Because
100%.
I don't know about you, but I know for me, the first thing that I tend to do when I'm stressed is I try and train a little bit more, right? So
Mm-hmm.
typically, if I'm stressed out or I'm anxious about something, first thing that goes is my sleep, but then I'm trying to like exercise to help like relieve
Yep.
some of that anxiety or stress or tension. So, it could be actually, hang on a second, maybe we need to look at some of the underlying causes of this, and maybe we need to really have a look at what's going on with our mental health and are we coping with all of the changes? Because when you look at that poor fatigue, poor sleep, excessive fatigue, mood changes, some of that stuff can signal mental health challenges. And I think too many women chalk up mental health challenges during pregnancy as pregnancy issues when it's actually something going on with their mental health underlying. And I think then what happens is they go through the postpartum era, and then after that, they're still experiencing those things, but they've just kind of put it down to pregnancy, being tired postpartum, but they're actually suffering from mental health issues. So I think if someone is experiencing those things, absolutely speak to your healthcare provider, especially if it's been going on for more than 2 weeks.
No, that's great advice.
Mm.
And
And
I think also, cutting it back, having more nutrition, may help too. And if that, listen to your body. I had a very interesting conversation not too long ago with somebody, and she said she's telling me all about this instinctive eating. And I'm like, instinctive eating? What are you talking about? She's just like, sometimes I want a steak. And she's like, so I eat it. And I'm like, okay, do you feel better? And she's like, yep. And then she figured it out that it was actually around the time she had her menstrual, her period every month. That's actually when she was craving her steak. And,
Mhm.
because she's probably like needs the iron or whatnot. But yeah, no. And then talking to your doctor and letting them know how you feel is very, very important, especially if you are exhausted, you're working way too hard. My doctor took me off work in two of my pregnancies, took me off. Just too much, too much going on. But if I would not have said anything, if I would not have talked to my doctor, who knows what could have happened. But yeah, I mean, I was absolutely exhausted, or I was overworked. It was causing me to have cramps pretty early in
Mm.
my third trimester, which is not good because those can turn into contractions. And he's like, you're done. And you know what? I remember the first pregnancy when they took me off, they ended up taking me off work because I was doing too much. And my cramps, I never had one more cramp the entire pregnancy. And I had a nice, healthy, baby girl. So it's, definitely that was great advice. I love that.
Mm.
For sure. There are some we're gonna wrap it up here soon. So, but
Mhm.
I feel like we have so much more to talk about. It's interesting. I remember when I did when I came on your podcast, we ended up doing episode 1 and 2
Yeah.
because we had so much to talk about. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like, oh, here we go. We're gonna do it again, episode 1 and 2. But anyway, I think there was a couple things that are really, really
Mhm.
important. I'd
Mhm.
mentioned two of them at the beginning. So this is what I want to cover really quick with you is abdominal wall, that separation. Can moms
Mhm.
do anything during the pregnancy to help prevent that, or after their pregnancy? And they have baby, what should they be doing to
Mhm.
help decrease, that wall separation? Because I'll tell you, I had my last baby at age 38.
Mhm.
And my separation was really bad, and my tissue was not bouncing back. I'll just
Mm.
leave it at that. So that, and I think pelvic floor, I'm a 3 C-section mom.
Mm.
So there wasn't, but I have other moms who have done the vaginal deliveries. And I do know pelvic floor right now is huge. I even know in the medical world, I mean, I have doctors now, and that's all they do is pelvic floor. But I think they're coming more into 30 years after mom had a baby, helping her fix
Mm.
her pelvic floor.
Mhm.
But in terms of preventative.
Mm.
So those two things would be huge. And then the last thing,
Yeah.
if mom is busy, so I was always the working mom, and then and then I had kids, and then I was working on kids and family and whatnot. But even like a mom like me, I'm so busy. 20 minutes 4 days a week. Like if there's something that, a mom like, if a mom's out there like me, like how I was, is something that they could be, doing during just a quick 20 minutes a day for their, exercise.
Okay, well, the exercise thing is going to be hard because that's going to be really individual.
That's
But
what
I
we've
can
talked about
certainly
the
not.
entire podcast.
But
Okay.
I
Is
can.
there any in general guidelines that
Yeah,
they
we can talk about that.
and
And
general recommendations or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think just a couple of things have come up for me since like we've been talking, and that was, when you're talking about your lady talking about instinctive eating. I think that's got a specific word for it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But I feel like a lot of women these days are actually quite disconnected from their bodies. So
Mm.
when you tell women to trust their instincts, it's like it's very difficult for them to actually really like fall into their body and figure out what it is that they actually need. And I guess part of a coach's role is to help empower a woman to feel like she can still do so many things when it comes to training during pregnancy. And I think something that is interesting because one of my clients saw something that I posted on social media. Now, she was many years postnatal. I'd continued to train her, but she saw this pregnant woman's training session, which I posted on my social media. And it was her last session before pregnancy. And she was like, hang on a second. So I'm training like a pregnant person. And I'm like, I think you've got that slightly different here. And the messaging is actually that pregnant women can really train like a normal person. Like it doesn't have to be super modified. Of course, there are things that we need to consider, but it doesn't have to change that much. Does that make sense? So it's not that
Yeah.
you're broken. It's not that there's something wrong with you. You're still able to do really incredible, cool things during pregnancy. It's just about understanding that line of what, and it's a fine line, and everybody's line is different and comes in a different spot. Like I've got some women that I'll train during pregnancy, and because I trained them prenatally, I know what they're capable of. And they don't have any pain. They don't have any pelvic floor dysfunction. They don't have back pain, pubic symphysis pain. They're completely pain-free. So what I can get them to
Wow.
do is going to be totally different to what someone else can do. But I think
Mhm.
that the message needs to be empowering in terms of what they can and can't do. And the reality is it's not too dissimilar. It's just slightly refined, right? But I think the message also needs to be that you need to look at your training during pregnancy as kind of a prehab to your postnatal recovery journey. So what you're trying to do during pregnancy, we're not here to break any records. You're not trying to set any like records or beat any PRs. The goal of training during pregnancy is to help you in your postnatal recovery journey. And that is where the abdominal separation piece comes in and the pelvic floor dysfunction piece comes in, because those two pieces are key to the postnatal recovery journey. So if you can manage to get through your pregnancy with very minimal abdominal separation and a strong functional pelvic floor, that's going to make your postnatal recovery journey so much smoother and easier than someone that has to overcome abdominal separation or some type of pelvic floor dysfunction. And I've certainly worked with women that fall into both those sections. I've trained a woman who post-birth, she had what we call levator avulsion. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but I think this story is quite empowering, right? So she had what we call a levator avulsion. So one of her tendons that holds the pelvic floor to the pelvis on the inside of the pelvis was torn away during pregnancy. So after
Mm.
birth, she actually couldn't walk more than 10 minutes at a stretch, no more than 10 minutes at a time. So with pelvic floor physio help, yeah, it's a lot,
Dude, yeah, I
right?
know. I couldn't have like, how do you take care of the baby? But go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly.
I'm like
So
that poor mom.
with the help of a pelvic floor physio and obviously strength training with me, we managed to get her doing the Spit to Manly walk here in Sydney, which is quite like a hilly walk that takes over an hour. It's stunning, beautiful, but it's very hilly, lots of stairs, and it takes over an hour. So, you know, and I think when you work with the number of women that I have in person, that's where that caution comes in, I think, and understanding that, you are holding a woman's postnatal journey in your hands when you train them during pregnancy. And what you do with them during pregnancy can have such a significant impact, not only to their postnatal journey, but their health span and lifespan afterwards.
Mm.
So because like I think this number 3 reason or number 2 or number 3 reason for women to go into care when aged care is because they're incontinent. And this is where this is where it's really exciting and things are changing when it comes to how women are treated during pregnancy and their postnatal recovery and pelvic floor. This is the stuff that I'm passionate about, and this is where I love that things are changing, is that there's so much more focus on this. So when it comes to abdominal separation, which I know you asked about before, the abdominal separation happens in 100% of women in their late stage 3rd trimester. So you can't actually avoid it, right? Like 100% of humans have a gap in their in their abdominal wall, which is the linea alba. Okay. Do you want me to go into detail around it? Do you want me to explain what it is and go into detail around that?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you?
Okay.
Yeah, and then kind of trying to guide them or say, hey, there is stuff you can do to help with it. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So 100% of women have abdominal separation by late stage pregnancy in their 3rd trimester. Now, actually, all humans have a hole in their linea alba, which is what separates when we talk about abdominal separation, because that's where the umbilicus goes, right? So 100% of women, 100% of humans have a gap there. Now, I'll just go through the anatomy of the core and pelvic floor quickly for you. So if you imagine your core as an upside down water bottle, so you've got the upside down water bottle, the top is your diaphragm, the bottom is your pelvic floor, and an upside water bottle is really good because it's kind of funnel like, and then it's got a hole at the bottom of it, right, which is where women birth their babies through. Now at the back you have these small muscles called multifidus, and then you have a large belt like muscle that wraps around called your transverse abdominis. Now on top of that you've got your internal and external obliques, and then you've got your rectus abdominis, which is your six-pack muscle. Now joining all of those is a band of fascia called your linea alba. And it's that linea alba that stretches during pregnancy. And something that I love, this is a really good key for anyone listening that is pregnant, something that I love to tell women when it comes to pregnancy is that as women, so many of us hold our stomachs, like we've spent our whole lives trying to hold our tummies in, right? Pregnancy is a time to just let it relax. Okay. You want to let your abdominal wall relax as much as possible. Because just think about it. Any kind of tension that you're trying to hold in the abdominals is then going to put more pressure on that fascial line, on the linea alba. So rather than the muscles being nice and relaxed and them stretching along with the linea alba stretching, if you're still trying to hold that pregnancy in and hold the muscles in and hold everything tight, then it's going to put more pressure on the linea alba. Now, when it comes to the linea alba and abdominal separation, there's a couple of different types. So you've got when the fascia just stretches, and then you've got when it actually tears. So the tearing is a little bit more kind of injury-based abdominal separation. And then the stretching, it's all about maintaining the tensity of not only the muscles, but also the fascia. So we're kind of moving away from that whole getting the abs back, closing the gap mentality. It's not about closing the gap. It's about maintaining function of the abdominal wall again. And this is where training during pregnancy and knowing how to correctly activate your transverse abdominis and your pelvic floor come in. So if you can maintain connection to that and understand how to do that correctly during pregnancy, it actually makes the postnatal recovery better, easier, less, better, easier. There's less dysfunction on the other side. Now, you should never be scared of doing core work during pregnancy. It's about making sure that you're correctly containing intra-abdominal pressure during pregnancy. So you're not putting excess pressure on the abdominal wall. So that would be doing things like breath holding when you're doing something, when you're doing an exercise, or if you can see coning through that midline, that would be a
Mhm.
really clear indicator that you're not correctly containing that intra-abdominal pressure. Now, the more that happens, the more likely it is to kind of stretch and separate. Then there's other things that we need to be mindful of as well. Now, the whole crunching during pregnancy, that's changing. There are safe ways to work your rectus abdominis, which is the muscle that works when you flex and extend your trunk. And it's important that we stay connected to these muscles through pregnancy. Now, I'm not saying go out there and crunch your life away, like crunch away during
Yeah.
pregnancy. It has to be done in a way that you're breathing correctly, you're watching your abdominal wall, making sure that there's nothing, like you're correctly containing that intra-abdominal pressure. So the whole no crunching during pregnancy, that's kind of shifting a little bit. The strong rotational stuff isn't really changing much, right? So when you think about the role of your obliques, as one contracts, the other relaxes, right? That's kind of their role. Now, when you think of the pressure that puts on the linea alba as one muscle contracts and the other relaxes, you can have this kind of pulling effect through here. Now, I can talk about this stuff for days. It's also
Yeah.
about
You're very knowledgeable.
correctly understanding how to engage your core muscles. Because
Mhm.
another thing that I see is super common in postnatal women. It's really common in women that do a lot of like core work, but they're not engaging their deep core muscles, right? So what they're doing is they're actually using their obliques, which is the muscles on the side here, and they're gripping through their oblique muscles, which then puts pressure on the linea alba at the front as well. So there's all kinds of things that need to be considered when it comes to training during pregnancy. And then of course you've got the pelvic floor aspect on top of it, and that's where that again the intra-abdominal pressure comes into play. And I think maybe the best way to explain this would be like a squeezy ball. You know those squeezy stress balls?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, I have some in my
yeah, so
car.
if you think of that like your core, and what I'm talking about with the gripping through obliques, if you squeeze a squeezy stress ball, God, try saying that fast 10 times on both sides, then that stress ball is going to blow out through the front, right? And the front of that's your abdominals, like that linea alba. If you squeeze it through the middle, it's going to go up and down, right? And down's your
Right.
pelvic floor. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's all about correctly containing neutral intra-abdominal pressure. And
Mhm.
part of that is understanding how to engage transverse abdominis, but also doing it as you're engaging pelvic floor as well. So my overall advice, and like I said, I can talk about this stuff for hours. My overall advice to people would be to get into the specialist women's health physio and have that properly assessed, because
Mhm.
50% of women don't do their pelvic floor exercises correctly. And then when you add something like hypertonic pelvic floor on top of that, that adds a whole other kettle of fish that we can open if you are just going Kegel, 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 pelvic floor exercise without actually understanding what's going on with your pelvic floor before starting those exercises. Because what you don't
Mm.
want to be doing is, and for those that don't know, a hypertonic pelvic floor is a tight pelvic floor. So when you need to birth a baby through your pelvic floor, if your pelvic floor is too tight, and I'm sure you've probably come up against this a lot,
Mhm.
it's very difficult when a muscle needs to stretch 3 times its natural length. It's very difficult to birth through something like that that's tight, and then someone's gone and done loads of Kegel exercise and actually tightened it up more, thinking they're doing the right thing, when what they actually needed to be doing was relaxing it and learning how to contract and then relax, because remembering muscles contract and relax, right?
Yep.
And you want a muscle that's got that flexibility to it. Like a good muscle is a muscle that's flexible and
Yeah.
moves, it's got contract and relax. So I think that's probably the number one piece of advice I can give to anyone, and it's almost like I don't really work with people anymore unless they've been to the specialist women's health physio, because that's
Wow.
something, they're like my eyes to a part of their body that I can't see. It's internal. There's certain things that I can do when I'm looking at someone. I can see what their belly button's doing to see whether or not they're engaging their abdominals correctly. But actually, like, let's see where it's sitting, its resting tone, and how it's sitting in the pelvic bowl. I can't see that. I can't tell them you need to relax it, you need to contract it. We need to strengthen, we need to relax. I don't know that. And if they're planning on a vaginal birth, that information's very important.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah,
That
it's a lot.
this day and age, with what you know, based upon your experience in
Mhm.
helping women, have good births and then recuperate, will not work with somebody if they don't do women's physio for pelvic floor.
At least
Wow.
at
That,
least the
that
check.
just speaks volume.
Mm.
Maybe the person you send everybody to can be the next guest, because we obviously then we need to get a women's physio on, so
Mhm.
we can talk more about it. Because if you believe it's that important, then it's that important.
It is.
Um,
Yeah, I think I mean, I can certainly pass you on to someone who I refer all of my clients to. It is
yeah,
important,
somebody who
and
can
I
come
think
in. And one thing that I do too is I always try to see, what is not in baby cases, because
Mhm.
obviously I see when things go wrong. So I'm like, what's not in these cases? And I can tell you, not one plaintiff I've ever spoke to ever did pelvic floor therapy
Mhm.
before giving birth. Not
Mm.
one. That
Mm.
means it's obviously helping in some way, shape, or form, dramatically. Otherwise, we would just, if it'd be part of cases here and there, somebody would have it. And no one's people who, things go wrong, they don't have that pelvic floor therapy. And
Mm.
obviously, with what you're saying, that's a really powerful, strong statement coming from somebody like you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely want to I think I just got my next episode. But
I mean,
Tammy, any closing words? I still feel like you have so much to share, so much to tell us. I mean, we're probably going to have to, at some point here, have you back on to finish everything. But
I've got
anything?
I've always got so much to say when it comes to training during pregnancy and the whole journey. I mean, there's a reason why the pregnancy process program covers, from the first trimester to the end of the fourth trimester across 4 different pillars, which is education, mindset, training, and nutrition. And the content of that is absolutely, like, it's deep and it's long, and it's an educational program because there's so much change that a woman goes through. And I think it's really overwhelming when women have children. They've got so much change that they're facing in every single aspect of their life. Their body's changing, their relationships are changing, their work life balance is changing. They're looking at periods of not being at work, which is super important to a lot of women's like identity. The way that they the way that they train is changing. So I think finding a guide that can take you through that and kind of cut through the noise, because
Mhm.
there's so much content out there in this space. There's so much contradictory content
Yes,
out there as
so
well.
much.
You go to one person and they say one thing, you go to another person, they say something else. I think it's about finding the right guide for you that has the experience, that has the qualifications that you trust to actually guide you through. That is very important because it it's one of the most significant transitions in a woman's life. And what you do during this period has the capacity to positively or negatively impact your health span and lifespan, and that trajectory through your perimenopausal phase, through your menopausal phase, and into late life as women. So I think investing in your health and well-being in this period of your life is very, very important, but also continuing it in the postpartum period, but also finding someone that you really trust that will impart that knowledge on you is really important. And I think that's one of the reasons why I developed the pregnancy process, is because I couldn't just turn up in the pregnancy training space without providing the added information, because so many women I've had that conversation with, and they're like, oh, I wish I knew that before,
Right.
and I mean, I think, have you had Theodora Kemp Clark on your program?
Nope.
No. I interviewed someone recently on the pregnancy process podcast, and she had a horrific birth injury, and I feel like these things can be mitigated, or at least kind of, and probably in what you do as well, I think we can minimize them a little bit more, sharing the right information with women going through this stage. But sadly, I think because so many, like 80% of 50% of the population go through childbirth, it's really normalized. And I think we need to stop normalizing it and start seeing it for what it is. And that's a really significant shift in every aspect of their life, and also something that can profoundly impact their physical body. So yeah, I mean, I have so much to say
I know
about
you do.
this,
But why don't you wrap up too?
Sure.
Tell everybody your website. It'll be in the show notes, but
Mhm.
what's your website and your
I
handle
think
on
if
Instagram?
anybody wants to get in touch with me, probably the best way to do that is through social media. Because, like I said, I'm going through a bit of a period of redevelopment in my business, which is very exciting. But I think if anyone wants to reach out to me through social media, Instagram, the pregnancy process will connect you to me. And there's so much really helpful information there, across all aspects, with the podcast and with, a lot of the information that I share about training during pregnancy. So yeah, if anyone needs anything, they can reach out to me through the pregnancy process.
That's great. Thank you for offering that to everybody. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. And if you're interested in taking the course, looking more at it, remember everything with the course is virtual. You don't have to go to Australia to see Tammy.
No.
So, anyway, thank you for coming on. And
Thank
I
you,
am also
Gina.
on social media. So I am on Instagram at Gina Mundy. And then obviously YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe if you like. And best way to always get a hold of me is my website, ginamundy.com, GINAMUNDY. If you send a message, it actually will literally go to my email to my phone, and I should get it pretty quick. So anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in to this special episode. I appreciate it. And until next time, hug those kiddos and have a good one.